The level of power that mutants in this universe have it disrupts every assumption that we have.
Where is like the legal and ethical compromise?
Right.
You know?
Anytime I make a bad decision, if I'm in this mutant universe, I'm going to blame anybody else on that in this world. And I think I've got reasonable doubt, especially if I'm in a jury pool that maybe doesn't like mutants as much.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Doug Defense, the show where a real lawyer talks about fake things. I am Billy Business. And, of course, we have the professor himself, Mr. Doug Ridley.
I should have worn a green blazer and marked up my eyebrows.
And we'll put some wheels on your chair.
Yeah.
I think we could have you would have made a great Xavier.
I know. Or Wheels, as Logan calls him in this one.
Oh, that's right. What's your name?
Wheels.
So today we're talking the 25 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
The first X-Men movie. Now, before we get started, let's just get the big elephant in the room out of the way.
Okay.
Just up top.
All right.
On this show, Doug Defends, real lawyer talking about fake stuff.
Yes.
There's a big real life legal problem with the director of this film,
Yes.
Bryan Singer. He has been accused of horrific stuff. He's a monster human being.
Yes.
We are not getting into any of that real world legal stuff on our show.
No.
We're talking about, the characters and the plot of the movie, not kind of anything around it. So
otherwise, it wouldn't be a real life lawyer talking about fake stuff.
No, that would be very real and it'd be very depressing.
Right.
So from here on out, if Bryan Singer, if we mention him, we're talking solely about the director of this film.
Right.
We are not going to be talking about the legal stuff about him. In his case, there's plenty of stuff online that you can go check out if you want to know about it, but that's not what we're talking about here.
Nope.
What we are talking about here is arguably one of the first superhero movies to kick off where we are today.
No question.
Now, that's not to say that stuff like Tim Burton's Batman or the Richard Donner Superman or even 1998's Blade didn't kind of get the ball rolling. But in terms of, especially for Marvel, taking some, there's a big jump between Blade and X-Men.
For sure.
X-Men was, a household name at that point. In the 90s, I still think Jim Lee's X-Men #1 is like one of, if not the biggest selling comic book of all time.
Yeah.
This was a mega popular IP.
Right.
And so to bring them to the big screen, this was kind of Marvel's first big foray into it.
Yeah, no question about it. And it holds up. And that was the thing. We just did the rewatch to prep for the show today last night. And it's good, and these actors are good. And I mean, look, the fact that we just had Deadpool and Wolverine, and it's played by the same damn actor 25 years later is amazing. That Hugh Jackman is still playing Logan.
But I also think it's interesting to see specifically with Deadpool and Wolverine, the evolution of it took 25 years before the filmmakers felt comfortable enough that the audience would be comfortable enough with him putting on the iconic thing. We are still in this era, and you could maybe trace this back to Tim Burton a little bit, where it's like, we can't go full on spandex, blues, and yellows. Like, how do we present this in a slightly more grounded way, which is where we got the leather suits instead of their colorful costumes.
Which is awesome, but I love that they specifically acknowledge it in the film too. Like, what'd you expect? Yellow spandex? Ha 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 ha.
Which is funny because 25 years later, it's like,
yeah,
that's exactly what I expect.
Yeah,
Where is it?
Yeah, yeah.
So this movie definitely is a pioneer in terms of really laying the foundation about where we are today with comic book movies. I think it also it's X-Men. X-Men has always been kind of the real world mirror to civil rights issues.
Absolutely.
And I think this film really highlights it. So we're going to be talking a lot about kind of the legal aspect of the X-Men and the Brotherhood.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them are going to need lawyers, though.
I think so too. I think so too. You know, and I'll say I'm a huge X-Men fan, like ridiculous X-Men fan, and for me, I had watched animated, so I knew enough about X-Men to be excited, to be really pumped about this film. But it was also because the animated show had done such a brilliant job of layering in all of those issues, and so I think there were, you know, maybe not so many adults that knew about X-Men unless they were like deep, you know, entrenched comic book fans. But the first set of comic books that I bought were actually as an adult, and they were X-Men comics. So I was so excited for this movie, and it's real, and it has that gritty feeling. I don't know how they pull it off so well, because I mean there's so many different issues, you know, with comic book characters today, and what plays on the screen and what doesn't play on the screen, and like from the very first moment that we see Rogue, even at the very beginning, or my gosh, the opening sequence with Magneto, it tells you exactly what they're serving up. And it's going to be a conversation about legal ethics, legal discrimination, and there's so much stuff for us to talk about from a lawyer perspective.
Well, unfortunately, the idea of people hating other people that are different is just a tale as old as time that doesn't seem to go away.
Yeah. Well, you know, in everything that they pull into, be it the camps, be it the Gestapos, be it the Mutant Registration Act, the mutant hunters that are going through society, it's
there's a lot.
It's relevant.
Yeah, it's very relevant. You mentioned Rogue in the start of the movie.
Yeah.
So let's start there with Us, because to me, I kind of think the first X-Men movie, more than I'd say any of the other mutant movies, because I know there's like Deadpool's and everything else, the spinoffs. I think the first X-Men movie is very much played at the beginning as a body horror movie.
Yeah.
And we see Rogue, and she's with her boyfriend at the time, and she doesn't really know she has whatever abilities that she has.
Right.
And she pretty much sucks the life out of this
Right.
kid. Horrifying, terrifying. Yeah. But I guess, you know, what kind of liability does anyone have for, like, truly, I didn't know that I could do that to you? I mean, I guess in a real world sense, it would be more of like if someone assaulted someone, it's like, I didn't even know.
Right.
You know, if I hit you that hard, I didn't know I could hit that hard type of
Right.
thing. Even though this is much different because there was never an intent to assault this kid.
Right.
You know?
Well, and part of the mythology is that the mutants that are coming of age, it happens during puberty. It happens at that point, and they don't know. And, you know, we see a lot of stories through the X-Men comics of, you know, thankfully it was just a kiss and it was one boy and he ended up being okay afterwards, you know, where we see other mutants that turn into bombs and explode. So, you know, for her, I think if I'm Cody's parents, the boyfriend's parents, I think I'm going to want, you know, if he has some sort of permanent damage, I think I'm going to want to sue Rogue's parents. And, you know, it's more like if somebody tripped and fell into your pool, you know, while they were on a play date, you know, we have liability for what happens with our kids' friends as they're coming over. So
could you prove that it was Rogue that did it, though? Because no one really knows what these powers are at that point.
Right.
I feel like the burden of proof would be very difficult.
It would be very difficult, because who's to say that he wasn't having his own like mutation moment where all the life drained out of him and went
to
into
know that he didn't accidentally eat
comforter
a peanut.
Right.
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 You know?
No, you're right. The proof problem would be the biggest issue. And if Rogue could just be quiet, maybe we could, you know, and just not admit anything and follow the advice of her attorney and just remain silent and not incriminate herself, it might work out.
Would you say if Rogue knew, because later on, especially in the later movies, we see her with like gloves and she's very careful. Even she doesn't even want to kiss Bobby, but she eventually, would you say that when it first happens that's a liability issue and not a negligence issue? Because I feel like if it happened after that, after she knew.
Yeah, if she just walked around in she wears some interesting outfits in the comics, but if she was not careful and not wearing gloves or not wearing long sleeves and was just walking around willy-nilly through a crowd at Disneyland, then we could sue her for negligence, at that point, and she would be responsible.
Okay, so eventually Rogue does run away, right? And that's where we end up meeting for the first time Logan.
Fight Club Logan.
Oh. If he uses those claws, though, I mean, brass knuckles are outlawed in the United States.
Right. They are. And if he used the claws, they would be blades. And we have laws about how long blades are allowed to be at all. And clearly, the blades that Logan have are longer than pocket knife size. So there's that as well. Is he in Canada
at that point?
He is in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just going to apply my little Southernly California knowledge to Canadian fight clubs.
I would assume Canadians are pretty peaceful people, that they're not going to want you to run around punching people with blades, right?
Probably not. But what was awesome about that is that the start of that fight, he gets kicked in the stomach a bunch of times, where he doesn't have adamantium protection, and then I was so struck with the sound effect of them hitting fists and the guy's hand just crumbling and the metal sound of the fist, and then he punches him in the head and metal sounds, and bone crunching. I mean, the sound effects on all of that were perfect. But if I'm somebody who just has really, 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 really strong bones, just because I'm awesome.
You drink your milk.
I drink my milk, like my mom told me to every morning. And you and I go fist to fist. I've never even really seen that in a real fight. But let's say that we go fist to fist.
Seems like a bad strategy.
It's a bad strategy, unless you're Logan. But if I know that my bones are stronger than anybody else's because I drank my milk and ate my Wheaties,
Sure.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's just meeting a punch with a punch. We've talked about self-defense before,
sure.
And clearly they're in a ring together, so they're both consensual. So there's that.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this is not a sanctioned ring, a sanctioned
probably
fight.
not.
So
probably
tell me,
not.
Fight clubs, they are real things.
Yeah.
If you get caught at a fight club,
right?
What are you like? What kind of?
I think it really depends on your jurisdiction and what's going on and who's involved. The idea that we could consent and have two people fighting, like in the backyard, is arguably fighting in public, arguably some sort of mutual combat scenario. It's 415 of the Penal Code, but it is the lowest level. Mutual combat fights, as long as nobody's getting seriously injured, are the lowest level. The challenge that we had in this movie was the guy didn't know that Logan had drank his milk and eaten his Wheaties, and came back afterwards like, you owe me my money because you cheated basically by having super strong bones.
Yeah.
So if in the real world, if somebody was in a fight club and they didn't realize that someone maybe had a metal plate in their arm, that's not unreasonable today. I broke the hell out of my wrist when I did 20 years ago and had some pins and screws and stuff like that. I know people that have had metal plates, put in their arms to repair bones. Well, what if I'm in Fight Club and all of a sudden I forearm some guy and it's titanium?
Yeah.
I think that's the best real world example.
Okay. So while this is happening, we get kind of introduced to what's going to be the main kind of topic of the movie, which is the Mutant Registration Act.
Yes.
Senator Kelly is kind of the main proponent of that, where mutants are forced to register. What are just from hearing the speech in the Senate or whatever it was, what was your kind of legal take on if you were in that room right then? Would you be like, nope, 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 nope? Or would you be like, this might pass?
My answer would be drastically different in 2023 than it is now in the middle of 2025. And when we have politicians now that are talking about revoking people's citizenships, and we're talking about keeping lists on people, this is something that it would not surprise me if all of a sudden we heard on the news tomorrow that we need a list of anyone who was Mexican born in the entire United States, because we're going to track those people. There are people right now who believe that that is the right way to govern. I personally do not, and it sickens me. But as I was watching this again, it wasn't as poignantly relevant in 2000. It was relevant. I mean, there's always been racial discrimination, and singling out a class always is a problem. I mean, I think that's the core of what makes X-Men so good. But I wouldn't be as surprised today, because there are people who believe this stuff and really need to watch some X-Men. See what happens when you single out a group of people and make them the enemy just because they have a different set of DNA than you.
I mean, I guess, like, you really couldn't say, like, well, that would never happen, because it's like, well, the Japanese internment camps happen.
Exactly.
The Jim Crow laws happen.
Exactly.
Do you think this is something that would get held up in court, like Supreme Court, for a long time, though?
Well, right now, I wouldn't be as confident of that either. I would say, generally speaking, that rounding up a group of people based on class is 100% unconstitutional. And we have years and years and years of Supreme Court precedent that has said that. However, would this Supreme Court change that? I don't have confidence in the answer to that question. Not anymore. I would have never thought that they would just be rounding up people in the streets because they look like they might be immigrants. That's not that different than them rounding up mutants in the X-Men storyline. So, I mean, it doesn't make it as jokey and light as some of the things that we do on this show, but this is another example of this crazy world that we live in right now, mirroring the worst part of society that's depicted in films.
Well, let's take it. Let's take it a little more, not jokey, but
yeah.
So there is a place where these kids can go.
Yes.
Where everybody knows that. Okay,
Oh,
so they can
now
go
we went
to
Cheers. We should do Cheers. Oh my gosh.
like specifically for my dad.
Yeah.
So Xavier's school for gifted youngsters,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
In context, a safe haven, a beautiful place, a
Right.
place we need.
Right.
Legally, I feel like there could be some problems here.
There could be, and we see a lot of examples. I'm sorry, but I mean, we see a lot of examples of that throughout the comics, and there are kids that are shipped away, and their parents don't know that they're going to Mutant High.
So let's talk about that
Yeah.
first and foremost. Legally, does he have to disclose what gifted youngsters actually means? Because we see in the second movie, or maybe it's the third movie. Well, anyways, we know from just the lore of X-Men that Charles and at one point, Magneto were going around like almost recruiting and
Yeah.
like, your kid needs to come to our school. We'll take care of them.
Right.
Everything will be fine.
Teach them how to use their powers in a safe and humane way.
But do they need to disclose, like, by the way, this is kind of a militarized training on the bottom floor,
Right,
and
right.
we do house like some pretty intense weaponry,
Right.
and probably not like legally accredited. Like, I don't know if you could just transfer to a 4-year from Xavier School.
But what if you could? That would be amazing.
Fine, let's start there. Do you think Xavier is a legally accredited school?
I believe with all my heart that he got all the accreditations right. He is so proper, and but I think that would. I think that if we assume that, it makes it even more interesting, right? Because if we're doing a school, let's just say if it was a school for really smart kids, just the genius of the genius of the genius of the genius of kids. And we were going to get them all together, and we were going to do super advanced placement and gifted and talented education and all of those things. That is something that absolutely could be a thing. We have charter schools now that are focused. We have STEM schools that are focused in certain areas, theater schools, art schools. So if this is a school for a group of individuals that have something in common, I don't think there's anything legally wrong with that.
But do you have to disclose, like, the thing they have in common is the mutant X gene?
I think they do. And
Okay.
I think so. If Xavier's doing one of his with a parent, to trick them into letting Bobby come to the school,
Ooh, oh, well, there's a problem,
right?
I mean,
There's definitely been storylines throughout the comics and throughout X-Men lore where the parents weren't 100% aware of what was going on.
sure. I mean, it sounded like in X2, I know we're not talking about that movie. Sounds like Bobby's parents had no idea that's what he was going to school for.
Right.
But, okay, let's assume it's not an accredited school. I don't think it is.
Okay. That's fair.
Can you have a school with children there not accredited, and like, do you have to be accredited? Because I know in California, like, you have to send your kids to school. It's
Right,
law.
you do, and here in California, it would have to be some level of accreditation or some level of homeschool combined with the group collaborative school. There's a lot of school models that would exist. If they tried to run something that was just this loose thing in some rich dude's mansion, that would not fly.
I mean, honestly, on paper, this doesn't seem that much different than Kanye West's dipshit academy or whatever he tried to open that got shut down real fast.
That's right here in the border of beautiful downtown Moore Park. But yes, I mean, and actually there was a school that tried to open here in Southern California that got a bunch of interest from parents because it was going to be a charter school. It was going to be opened, so there were a lot of parents that chose not to enroll their kids in the public school because they were going to go to this private school. Turns out they had everything locked down except for the license. So as the first day of school for public school came and went, there were hundreds of parents that were still expecting to send their kids to this other school that shall not be named, and then ended up having to replace them back in the public school. So yes, Xavier School would have to be accredited if kids were just going to dawdle there all day, every day, whether they're training in tactical, battle plans or whether they're, learning history.
Look, here's the thing. I'm not trying to be that guy. I'm really not. But like, I would just assume, like, you can't just have like 5 kids in like Xavier's little office or,
Right.
And
Right.
be like, oh, it's history class time. Like, no, this is play school. This is not real.
I can absolutely see a scenario, though, where with Storm teaching in one room and Jean Grey teaching in the other room and doing all of that they could come up with a curriculum. And if it was licensed by the state of New York, which is where this is held,
Sure.
they could get it
But
licensed.
they would be giving themselves away.
They would.
Well, okay, you brought up another interesting point. And it's something that, it's very apparent throughout the entire X-Men franchise, which is Charles's ability to get in people's heads,
Right.
using it ethically and whatnot. But if Charles got in your head,
Yeah.
whether he influenced your decision to do something or not, which he does in this movie,
Right.
I mean, I don't even know. Like, that's not is there a real world? I mean, I guess like
Thankfully,
drugging someone and coercing them.
Yeah, I think that's the closest analogy. It would be, removing someone's ability to make their own decisions.
Right.
And we have laws that, make it so that if somebody is drunk enough or drugged enough, they can't consent to romantic activity with other people. So, if you're in a position where you have done something to somebody else that removes their ability to make their own decisions, to removes their ability to consent. Now, I'm great at getting people to agree with me on things. We're not talking about that, because I get people to agree with me all day, every day. I've made a business around it because I'm a lawyer. So that versus the level that Charles controls people. If I'm just the best convincer around, that's not going to be a crime. If I remove somebody's ability to consent and have sentience and have understanding and knowledge, then it's a problem. And then is what they did knowing and intelligent. I'll give one more example on this. When someone enters into a guilty plea or some sort of a plea bargain in a criminal case, we go through all of their constitutional rights, because they need to be aware of what rights they're giving up. They have a right to have a trial. They have a right to have a preliminary hearing. They have a right to remain silent, and they're giving up all of those rights. The last question on that form is, knowingly and voluntarily, has anyone made any threats against you or anybody that you love to get you to make this decision? Has anybody made any promises or tried to bribe you to make this decision? It's a part of our criminal justice system so much that we spend a lot of time in that area of, are you making this decision of your own free will? So we remove that by throwing in, wheels, manipulating your mind and taking away your consent. Then, yeah, we have a major problem.
Okay, let's talk about kind of the real villain, which is Magneto.
Yes. Or is he?
Or is he? I don't know. Charles could have easily ended all of this just by entering everyone's mind, but he doesn't.
Right.
Magneto, on the other hand, is a little bit more hands-on.
Yeah.
So we know he kidnaps Senator Kelly.
Yes.
And he straps him into that, the craziest machine that I've ever seen. I was like, did you have to make it that big? That seems a little dramatic.
Seems like they could have just done maybe a helmet.
Sure. Yeah. It was a little much, but sure. Why not? This one is interesting because obviously I'm not dense. He's good for kidnapping.
Right.
But what do you even call what they did to him?
Yeah.
That's not assault, because they didn't.
I would argue that it is.
Okay.
I would argue that it is an assault. I would argue that this is a combination of a poisoning with some sort of physical assault.
Well, what's the definition of assault?
Well, assault is an unwanted touching. Right?
Okay. So you're saying the plasma ray thing around him is unwanted touching?
Potentially the touching,
okay.
Right? I would say that poisoning is inserting a material into a person's body that harms them. We talked before about somebody lacing, a bunch of coffee or soup with LSD or mushrooms or something along those lines, or, and we've had people who've committed murder by poisoning. So if we have inserted something into Senator Kelly's body that makes him goo jellyfish boy, then I would argue poisoning. I think
the body horror, man.
Oh yeah.
When he finally
that was me trying to go through the bars just in case that wasn't clear.
That was good. When he finally kicks the bucket, the storm.
Yeah,
that's horrifying.
Just turns into a puddle of water on the floor.
Clean that up.
You don't.
Yeah.
You get one of the ex-kids to do it.
Ew,
on detention. Oh, man.
Hey, vacuum boy.
I got detention from Xavier again. I got to go clean up Senator Kelly goo.
Okay, so he uses that weapon. Would you, because it alters DNA, is that considered a biological?
I would say yes.
And just so we know, if I have an AR-15 and I have a biological weapon, am I in just as much trouble, or is one far worse than the other?
One is far worse.
Okay.
So an illegal gun is an illegal gun, and we have a set of laws against it. If you have a biological weapon, a weapon of mass destruction, the feds are going to be involved. We talked before about possession of explosives. That falls into that same category. If we have a possession of a biological weapon, then, and that definitely is what
I
happened.
mean, it changes his DNA.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and there are some folks that believe COVID was inserted into our society, right? And at that point, what's the difference between the goo ray plasma-y thing and something that alters somebody's DNA and makes them sick? It's the same sort of a deal. And feel free to delete the COVID part if you'd like.
Oh boy, RFK Jr.'s burner account is just going crazy on this episode.
I realized I just got us tagged.
Okay, so biological weapon against Senator Kelly.
Yeah.
We'll call it assault and
Yeah.
poisoning, but let's talk about the crimes that we're like, yep, definitely did that. He kidnaps a lot in this movie.
A lot.
Yeah. He kidnaps Kelly. He kidnaps Rogue
Right.
later. And I don't know. I assume, could you call it assault? He never actually touches Wolverine. I mean, that would be, if I have to defend Magneto, I'm going to say, he never touched him.
Right. That may have just been Wolverine's powers just stretching the claws out painfully like he's bending his fingers back.
Can you prove? Could you get Magneto off because there's no fingerprints, there's no nothing, there's no way
prove
to
that Magneto has
prove that Magneto
powers.
did what he did.
And it's not just Xavier over there bending metal with his mind.
I mean, any number of things. It's like if a piece of metal wrapped around, be like, oh, that's weird. A piece of metal got stuck in an air pocket and did a weird thing. Like,
right.
Can you prove it was me that did it?
I love the idea of blaming every single thing Magneto did on ghosts or other mutants. I mean, in a world, in a world where there are all of these mutants and all these powers, the things that we take for granted about causation and physics go right out the window. So how do you prove that it was Magneto bending back Wolverine's claws?
You were a former prosecutor.
Whew.
How would you go about this? Because you can really only get him for the kidnapping.
Right.
You can get him for the goo machine,
right.
I suppose.
Right.
But if Wolverine wanted to, if you wanted to, like, you couldn't do any of the, or like the guns, right? When all the guns are pointing at everybody, it's like, do you just have to leave that out because you're like, I can't actually prove that it's him?
What's awesome about that is going back to, we know that Xavier's in the car, and we know that Xavier's controlling Sabretooth and Toad on either side because Sabretooth's got his hand around Magneto's neck, right? Mm-hmm. So, what if Magneto had a man on the inside who was saying, yeah, Magneto lost his magnetic powers, 15 years ago after the war, and that must have all been Xavier. I mean, that would probably create reasonable doubt. I've never considered this before, but I think it creates reasonable doubt. How do you prove which mutant is affecting the stuff in the room? And there are times where that becomes a plot point in some of the comics.
I was just about to say, I feel like that's the main argument that people like Senator Kelly have, which is like, how do we have any sort of justice?
Right.
And again, it's like Xavier technically breaks the law by entering their minds to stop Magneto, who is breaking the law by, pointing all the guns, but you can't prove either one of them.
Right.
Which is bonkers.
Right. So sometimes when it's difficult to prove something, what we would use is circumstantial evidence. And people have this idea in the real world that, well, it's just circumstantial evidence. Well, there's actually a jury instruction here in California that says circumstantial evidence is just as good as actual evidence. It's just subject to a different reasonability standard. If there's a reasonable explanation that points to innocence and all you have is circumstantial evidence, you have to adopt that. So if that's our rule behind it, right? The circumstantial evidence would be every time this one dude is around, metal seems to go nutso, and we bring in 25 examples of in this point the bullets moved but none of the plastic. In this point the claws moved but not his flesh. In this point and build a case like that, then you could argue that it's more reasonable than not that the metal being moved around in the room is probably Magneto. And that is really like the genesis for so much stuff in X-Men lore. Like, Magneto's in the room because my watch has stopped.
Right. So yeah, I feel like movies and TV shows are like circumstantial evidence. Throw it out. It doesn't mean anything, but that's not.
But that's not the case. I mean, you could absolutely do that, but then it's a matter of a good defense attorney throwing up another reasonable explanation. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, there was this guy who was sitting in the car right out there who we know for a fact can move things with his mind. So how do you know that the guy that can move cars with his mind was the one that was doing this versus the guy that can only move metal with his mind?
Right.
So, wow. I just defended Magneto.
We're gonna get to the speed round at the end.
Okay.
Yeah. You have some time to chew on that. Well, here, let's throw another thing on this because it didn't stop at just kidnapping a senator or rogue. Now we're moving into the third act of the movie where he's going to unleash this thing on the entirety of New York, where a bunch of world leaders have gathered.
Right.
Has he now crossed the point, or is he already at that point? Is he already like a terrorist?
He's already a terrorist at that point.
Okay.
But there's no question that, especially when we use the biological warfare analogy for altering someone's genetics, right? He wants to infect all of those world leaders so that they become mutants. He's looking to change their genomes, and that absolutely is biological warfare. It is affecting enough people at that point that it then also becomes a weapon of mass destruction. And we know from them doing the ridiculously cool 3D model thing of New York that they did inside the plane, that was one of the coolest effects at the time. I loved. You remember what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay. I was just thinking, to me, the coolest shot, and it's so corny, but I love it, is when he does the full 360 with his claw around the Statue of Liberty.
I still don't understand how he does that.
I don't think it's.
I don't.
That was maybe the dumbest thing I was about to ever say. I was like, I don't think it's real.
You were cool with the metal attaching the skeleton to the blades, but where you drew the line was him looping around the crown of the Statue of Liberty.
You, I mean, at some point, you can use your blades and you scuff up that train station, and it's like, we talk about property damage a lot when we talk about superheroes. It's kind of like hand in hand.
Yeah.
He's defacing the Statue of Liberty. I feel like that's a slightly different thing.
Well, it is, and it would be, and there are special codes dealing with national monuments and damages to national monuments. But if I'm defending Logan, which I am always, because Logan's my favorite superhero, period. Logan was just trying to save his life.
Yes.
He was blasted off the top of the Statue of Liberty and would have survived because, he survives anything. But still, it would have been uncomfortable, for a while he's stitching all of his, skin back together as a pile of goo on the sidewalk. But
we know he can die. It is possible.
It is possible.
Yeah.
Sadly. But I think that I think he's got a self-defense argument. There was destruction of property, but he was trying to save his own life in the process.
Okay, sure, but I feel like I was trying to save my own life. I accidentally destroyed the freaking Mount Rushmore. People would be like, no, come on.
Well, I don't know. What's the scenario where Billy Business needs to destroy Mount Rushmore? You have the right to remain silent. Don't answer that question.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure that's maybe the plot of that Macaulay Culkin Richie Rich movie. But I digress.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, so I think Magneto is a pretty cut and clear terrorist. But I want to go back to Professor X for just a minute.
Yeah.
Because there's another kind of a big thing that in the context of the movie, you're like, this is awesome. And it gets even more awesome in X2. But legally, it seems like kind of a nightmare, which is Cerebro.
Yes.
This is, if you're not familiar, if you need a refresher, this was where Professor X goes into this room. It's like a big dome, and he's able to put on this helmet, and he's able to connect to every mutant on the planet to see where they are, to help find them.
Right.
He uses it to rescue them. As we see in the next movie, some people are going to use that for nefarious purposes. But this feels like the biggest invasion of privacy device maybe ever invented.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
100%.
So I mean, if they raided the school and they find this thing and they know what it's for, like, how do you defend that?
It's tough to defend it, especially when we know from Batman lore that when Christian Bale's Batman, he goes in and taps into every cell phone and acknowledges this is irresponsible, difficult, problematic technology, and gives Lucius the right to destroy it, which he does. This is worse because it's not just listening in to every single conversation for anybody he selects on the planet, but arguably he's tapping into thoughts. He's tapping into anything he wants to tap into. So is it defensible? I mean, this is a machine that amplifies his power, right? And
Theoretically, yes.
And so depending on where Jean Grey is in her Phoenix cycle, depending on where Professor Xavier is in which iteration, there are mutants that could do this from far away without the help of Cerebro, but he does use Cerebro to help. So this is where Senator Kelly's fear comes from, is the idea that there are even mutants out there that could change the way we think, that could read our very thoughts, our very minds. And we're supposed to feel uncomfortable about that because it does feel like the biggest invasion of privacy. Now, having said that, do I think for 1 minute that our government now doesn't see we have traffic cameras on every corner, depending on where you are in your conspiracy theory level in the world, we might be at a place where we are already under that constant surveillance.
Yes, but that's the government. This is a private citizen.
Right.
I think that to me would
Does that make you feel better?
No, but I'm not saying I love that, but
Yeah.
I also feel like for better or for worse, you just kind of know you're being tracked with everything. Whether it's the government, whether it's a cookie from a website that just wants to sell me advertisements on something.
Right.
My age group and newer especially, like, that's just the world we were raised in.
Right.
Which is why, like, something like The Truman Show almost doesn't register as much if you watched it today, because you're just like, not only does this seem dated from like an ethical perspective, it seems dated from like, well, now people are trying to broadcast their life 24/7.
Right.
I think with Xavier, where, and we kind of see this happen in the next movie.
Yeah.
It's not just Cerebro, which is bad.
Right.
But Cerebro is bad. I think it's awesome, and I love superheroes.
Right.
I think it's bad.
Right.
But you add his combination of, like, he can also kill someone with his mind. Those two things together, which almost happens.
Yes, almost.
I mean, like, now we're talking about, like, if he could find an enemy overseas.
Right.
A different country, kill him with his mind. Now he's violated like a Geneva Convention.
Right.
You know?
And there's nothing except for his agreement not to do that stops him from doing that. And this is where the villains have their justifiable concern. The level of power that mutants in this universe have it disrupts every assumption that we have. I mean, everything.
So then where is like the legal and ethical compromise?
Right.
You know?
Well, when it comes to the surveilling, mind reading, emotion altering, there are some mutants that have that. I think we are stuck in a proof problem, right? And anytime I make a bad decision, if I'm in this mutant universe, I'm going to blame it on the mutant that lives next door that told me that I should have one too many glasses of wine, before I left the house. I'm going to blame anybody else on that in this world, and I think I've got reasonable doubt, especially if I'm in a jury pool that maybe doesn't like mutants as much. We know right now that there are jury pools in this state that are going to be more friendly to defendants, and they're going to be more, or the other side, going to be more friendly to law enforcement.
Right.
So I think you have jury pools in this mutant universe that are going to be more fearful of mutants versus less fearful of mutants. If Sabretooth just went in and threw a car across the center square of the town you live in, you're going to be a lot more concerned about what mutants do. And it's going to be easier as a defense attorney to say mutants, mutants, mutants as the constant defense that you use for almost any crime.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's kind of like, again, on paper, it's pretty bad. But in the context of the movie, it's awesome. He's training his own little militia. And he's actively recruiting children like a Pied Piper. he's got like we said, that the danger room.
Right.
He's got the jets and
right.
All that. Like, I mean, I don't know where you went to junior high, but they certainly didn't have any militaristic training where I went. So it's like, is now Xavier going to be on the hook for like some massive child endangerment?
Well, yeah. I mean, the kid that sneaks into the janitor closet of the junior high school, what? They're going to get their hands on formaldehyde. But if they do something bad with it, the school's going to be liable. Everybody's going to be liable. The janitor's going to be fired. All of those things. Here, Jean Grey goes down, sneaks into Cerebro, and tries to use it. Now, she uses it for good, and that's great.
Well, we also know Mystique was able to get on campus.
Exactly. Yeah. And was able to get into Cerebro and poison Cerebro in this movie. So, it's that there are so many liability issues for what you decide to bring kids around. Now, a lot of the defenses that you would have for somebody that gets into the janitor closet, let's just keep on that thread for a second, are, what kind of locks did I put into place? How many efforts did I make to keep it safe? And in this house, there are apparently iris readers that that need that level of identification to get through the door and into the back. But then somehow Logan's able to walk all over inside. But maybe that's because Professor Xavier's letting him in. So the level of danger that these kids are at, because they could go in the room and, I don't know, find somebody's military equipment, or go in like sometimes we see people do, and look, there's a military jet. I wonder how I get on that and what happens there. So yeah, there's definitely a child endangerment aspect of it.
It almost kind of, in a weird way, it almost feels like a cult, because it's like you're bringing these kids in, even though we know that it's on the side of good, you're indoctrinating them into to a way of thinking. And also kind of training them to be part of a militia that we see go fight in a war at the end of the third one.
Right.
So, at what point do you cross that distinction between school for gifted youngsters and a cult with its own militia?
Right. Well, it arguably there are schools now that will have extra training in athletics, and maybe they have more training in martial arts or things along those lines. Are they training ninjas at their school? Probably not, right? But we also know that there are schools that are known to be recruiting centers for government positions. And so there's places where government is more likely to look for their next CIA agent or something along those lines for recruiting.
But that's not what's happening at Xavier's.
True.
He's making his own army, essentially.
Right.
His own team.
It's private.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not recruiting for...
So I think the legal distinction comes in if we compare this bear with me, to Hogwarts.
Okay.
So Hogwarts is a school for witches and wizards.
Also not accredited.
Right. The Ministry of Magic accredited it. But anyway, but everyone that goes to Hogwarts knows why they're going to Hogwarts.
Yes.
Every parent that sends their kids to Hogwarts knows why they're sending their kid to Hogwarts.
Yes.
If we could say that about Xavier's school for gifted youngsters, I think we probably are looking at something a little different that feels less nefarious. You know, if Xavier's school is Hogwarts for mutants, where, you know, oh, my kid can't stop shooting laser beams out of his eyes every time he opens his eyes. This is terrible. He can never open his eyes. And we're going to send him to this special school where he's going to learn how to get, you know, red sunglasses that block him. The maybe this is parental consent. This is something where, you know, you're teaching them special skills in order to get through something. I think the biggest legal problem that Xavier School has is the fact that the parents don't always know that their kids are going to Mutant High. And if they don't know, then they can't make a conscious decision to consent to bring their kid there. So the kids that are not informed about where they're going, their parents would have major lawsuits against them.
All right, let's get into some of our fan questions now that I've inceptioned you into thinking that Xavier is a cult leader. Mikey wants to know, if Wolverine claws someone in self-defense, would that be treated the same as using a knife, or would the court argue his body is the weapon? So we talk about meeting deadly force with deadly force, but if he gets in a fist fight and those claws even accidentally come out, is he now overstepping the meeting deadly force, you know?
I think that if they accidentally came out, then yeah, he's negligent. It would be like me accidentally having a gun go off, you know, that I had in my pocket.
Sheriff
Dwight. Sheriff Dwight, exactly. But I think that if it is in self-defense, like Mikey's question was, then I think he's allowed to use the claws as self-defense. It would be the same as if he had a machete in his pocket. I mean, he's just going to have to justify it that way and justify whatever use of force he has based upon the danger that's presented to him.
All right, this one is from Zoe. She says, if mutants like Rogue can accidentally hurt people by just touching them, would they, I don't know if you can answer this, would they have to buy special insurance like mutant liability coverage?
I think they would absolutely need to do that. I love the idea of mutant liability insurance. There's definitely some precedent in the Marvel universe about damage control and, you know, companies that specialize in superhero cleanup sites, you know, after battles and things like that. So totally makes sense that there would be mutant liability insurance. I mean, this is Senator Kelly's argument. We require people to register if they have a firearm. We require them to register if they have an automobile. Are they going to need to get insurance for the fact that they're a mutant in the same way that the fact that they own an automobile?
That would be a very expensive premium.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to open a mutant insurance agency and just make billions of dollars.
Oh, you'll be the most despised person on the planet.
You're trying to make me the most despised lawyer on the planet as it is. So I'm all right with it.
All right. Ron wants to know, if the X-Men destroy a train station while stopping Magneto, like they did, do they get sued for damages, or does Saving the Day cancel that out legally? We talk again. This is the property damage that we run into a lot.
Yeah, I mean, would they get sued for property damage? You know, maybe, because I mean, you know, we live in a litigious society where people file lawsuits all the time for all kinds of different things. Do they have liability? It goes into, could they have avoided it? Was there an easier way to do it? And somebody's going to microanalyze every single brick that gets moved. And was it the bad guy? Was it the X-Men as they were saving it? You know, we've used this example before. If a firefighter breaks down a door, they have a pass for that because they're fighting fires in an apartment building. If the mutants end up damaging the train station because they're saving the world from Magneto or trying to save Rogue from getting kidnapped, then I would argue that that's a defense for them in the same way.
All right. Last but not least, Metalhead. So he definitely knows he knows better. Turning world leaders into mutants. Would you consider that assault, terrorism, or would they have to invent a new category, maybe something like genetic warfare?
The interesting thing would be if it actually worked well, right? Magneto's plan was not to turn Senator Kelly into a jellyfish pile of goo.
Right.
His plan was to make him a brother.
Yep.
So if Magneto's plan actually worked and all they did was, now all of a sudden Senator Kelly can shoot laser beams from his eyes and join the X-Men as Cyclops 2.
Or what if he just turns into Waterboy?
Right, exactly. And just
Move
goes,
over, Adam Sandler. We got a new Waterboy.
There we go. Exactly. I mean, the problem with Magneto's plan is that it broke down the cellular walls or whatever of regular humans. So it just scientifically failed. But had his plan succeeded, he might have been lauded as making superheroes. I mean, any more than the guy that makes the radioactive spider that turns Peter Parker into Spider-Man, is, well, maybe he's liable too.
Yeah, but he didn't intentionally set out to have someone bit by that spider.
Right. And I think that would be the line. Are we turning people into superheroes against their will? But most superheroes have that as their origin story, right?
So do you consider that a crime that already exists, or do you think they'd have to make up a new category?
I think they'd have to make up a new one, because the other thing that we haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about in this episode so far is the fact that mutants are dirty. Mutants are viewed as bad.
Right.
We talked about this a little bit before the show, right? I mean, how is there this universe where every single person that can shoot a bow well is lauded as a superhero versus, the person that has claws and saves kids from being kidnapped is somehow hated and feared? The difference between mutants and superheroes is genetics. And so turning somebody into a mutant is seen as something bad in this universe. So it probably would have to be something different. And if it's done against their will, it would be some kind of a crime.
Well, I think the thing about X-Men, when it came out in the 60s and even all the way through today, it kind of sadly has always been relevant.
Yeah.
I think the way the world is going, it's going to be relevant for a while going forward.
Agreed. And most importantly, I need Marvel to stop teasing me about it and just bring me the new X-Men.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm so excited for the new X-Men. I just want X-Men.
One of the reasons why I wanted to do this episode, it's the 25th anniversary of this movie, but also we now know that a lot of these characters from this movie from 25 years ago are going to be in Avengers Doomsday.
Yes.
Which is just mind-blowing.
Yes.
I can't think of any, with, like I said, with Spider-Man, we've had 3 other Spider-Men, and we've had all these other recasts, but these X-Men, man, they're hanging in there.
They are.
Till they're 90. Well, we appreciate you hanging in there watching this episode with us. If you want to yell at us about whatever you want to yell at us about, that I called it a cult, you can leave a comment below. Also hit us up on social media at Doug Defense on TikTok and Instagram. Always very active on there. And if you want to take Doug on the go, you're jogging, you're cleaning the house, you're driving around, Apple and Spotify, rate, leave a review, do all the fun stuff, and subscribe. It's so easy to subscribe. It's one button. It's like right.
It's the bell. It's right there.
It's right there.
Yeah.
Like you see it right there.
Yeah.
Just do it real fast. Thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you guys next week.
Storm. What do they call you? Wheels?